Well, after a shocking twist, we are given a deeper look at what is sure to be one of the show's most interesting characters yet. Hey guys, coming from American Gods, Season 1, Episode 4, Get Gone, and I was definitely very interested in this episode, especially the way that the last episode turned out, with that amazing cliffhanger with Laura being on the bed as Shadow walked in. We didn't know what the hell was going on there, and I was very interested in seeing really what's going to happen there, and I figured this episode was going to be her explaining herself to Shadow. Turns out that's not really what this episode was at all. In fact, this episode was completely different than everything we've seen. It probably is the riskiest episode the show has done, which is not saying much because every episode of the show has been really risky. But I'm glad they decided to give us an episode like this that's laser focused on Laura. This entire episode was in Laura's perspective. And I think this was definitely the right thing to do now because they're getting their creative juices out of the way. They're showing, okay, this is what the show is going to be. These are the kind of episodes we're going to end up doing. We're going to do these sort of like single character focused episodes and just be prepared. And for me, this was the best episode of the season, easily. I really did love this episode. We had a really compelling narrative here. We had a lot of interesting stuff going on. But let's just get into this episode because from here, I am definitely very interested in seeing where we're going. And I love the way this episode starts because immediately we start off and things just seem really different, which it is. Like I said, this episode is very different. There's no opening flashback. There's no Mr. Ibis telling us a story. This is the first episode where we don't see that because this isn't really American Gods. This is more Laura Moon's story. We start an Egyptian-themed casino and the pit boss call a blackjack dealer who's Laura over and points out she's turning her table over faster even when she shuffles, and he tells Laura that she doesn't have to shuffle, but she says that she enjoys shuffling, and later she's driving home, she lets her cat out, she hard-boils an egg for supper, and as she eats and reads, a fly then flits around her house, and she takes out some Get Gone bug spray and kills it, and she then gets in her hot tub, seals the lid, fills the airspace with the bug spray, and a few seconds later, coughing, she opens the lid, and we don't know what this is really all about. Why does she want to use this Get Gone spray? What is so important of it? What's really the significance of that? So back at the casino, she's dealing blackjack. Shadow sits down at her table and cashes in, and the scene between her and Shadow is very different than anything we've come to know. In fact, Shadow portrayed here is a lot different than what we've seen. He's not as down himself, and he's just a really likable guy. And it's understandable, this is really when he had it all. He didn't have to worry about her dying. He wasn't in jail yet. Their interaction is very crucial here, and I really do think they played that off very well. He sits down at her table, cashes in. And Laura, like I said, she's not really the person that Shadow thinks she is. She really does not have her shit together, we realize. And he makes small talk with Laura, uses sleight of hand to slip in higher-priced chips when he wins. And she notices, and she finally invites him not to cheat because not only will the guards break his hands, but they will prosecute. And she advises Shadow to play his last hand and leave, and Shadow finally smiles, walks out, and Laura smiles briefly and then continues dealing, and later she goes to her car. Shadow approaches her, he says he was waiting for her and asks why she helped him, and Laura admits that he was kind of a dick, and he was very unlucky, and she tells him that he's not very good at robbing a casino, and Shadow says that next time he'll have a better plan and maybe an inside man. He says that she looks like someone who can get anything she wants just by asking for it and offers to split the take 50-50 with her, and she starts to walk away. Shadow offers to buy her a drink because he feels beholden, and she doesn't want to go anywhere with him and just wants to go home, and Shadow tells her to take him home with her. He wants to make sure that he gets her home and everything, that she's safe, and again, you can tell that he's just basically like immediately putting himself out there and trying to, smash her and everything, and they arrive, and that's exactly what goes down, which, again, I thought this was very crucial stuff, but it really did show that the, Laura that Shadow thought he knew really isn't that Laura at all. This is a much different kind of Laura, and I really do love the way this episode showed that this really is not who Shadow thinks she is. It's just a great example of how we really do see everything different in our perspective, and we don't really know how someone is unless we really get in their peripheral vision, and that was something that was shown very well here. So when they arrive at Laura's house, Shadow and Laura kiss, they start to make love on the couch, and when Laura hesitates, Shadow asks if she's okay, and she slaps him twice, and after a moment, he flips her over, rips off her panties, and takes her from behind, and the next morning, she wakes up in bed completely alone. Now, we don't know what's really going on here. She goes to the kitchen, and Shadow is drinking coffee, he's practicing one-handed card cutting, and he notices she has a hot tub and asks if she ever uses it, and she says that she does, and he flips 4 aces out of the deck, and she tells him to show her how he did it, and Shadow does, and soon she does the trick herself, and Shadow then pulls her over to kiss her, and she continues to go to work, and she and Shadow have a barbecue with Audrey and Robbie, and these are 2, again, very crucial characters. Now, what we've seen of Audrey, it's a lot different than the book. Audrey, I heard, really wasn't much of a character, people didn't really like her. This show is an incredible job of really getting us to like this character, and especially Audrey is very important because she's really the only one that's still alive in this narrative. And then Robbie, of course, we know that Robbie is the person that Laura supposedly cheated on Shadow with, and I think this episode, again, we didn't really know if that's what actually went down or if that's just kind of what Shadow saw. So basically, Audrey tells her that Robbie never looked at her like Shadow looks at Laura, and basically, saying that that's true love and everything. And later, after sex, Laura talks about her cat Donnie and how they warn their owners of thieves. She asks if Shadow ever worries if he'll go to jail if he keeps stealing, because, what he's doing is very, very illegal, and he's aware of that, but for whatever reason, he continues to do it, and he asks if he believes in the afterlife, and Shadow talks about his mother's beliefs and how his mother always believed in stuff, but as we know, Shadow doesn't really... he is definitely a firm believer because of his mother. Laura, on the other hand, feels like there's nothing, that just after death, there's nothing but rotting, and that is the worst possible feeling that one could really endure. Sure, everyone does have their own sort of ideas of what death really is. I don't think there's a worse, there's really a worse definition of death than, there's just nothing at the end. You're basically just fade out of obscurity completely, and there's nothing left for you. It's crazy to think about, but she insists that there's nothing to believe in. Her parents believe in everything, but she's never really found anything to believe in. And I kind of got the sense it's because she's never really, God's never really been on her side. He's never really helped her out. The life that she has is not really the life that she desired, so why the hell should she decide to, be faithful to God? Why would she ever do something like that? So Laura wanted to get back the magical belief that she once had, but she couldn't because it's just not that interesting to her, unfortunately. She just doesn't find it that fascinating, and Shadow looks at her, and Laura tells her not to look at her like a lost puppy, and that was a very powerful scene. Again, to Shadow, Laura just kind of had it all, that she was like the perfect girl, but we're seeing that that's really not the case. God hasn't really been on her side, and we see them very quickly get married, and she tells Shadow that it was fun. He tells her that the fun is just getting started, and I will say, this episode is very rushed, but I feel like it needed it. It wasn't too rushed, but it was just a little more faster because there was a lot to cover, obviously. So another barbecue, Robbie tells Shadow that he should come down to his gym and take one of his fighting classes, and Shadow continues boxing for exercise, and Laura works at the casino, and they continue about their lives, and Laura occasionally is looking at the hot tub. We don't really know why, but Shadow goes to the store, and Laura asks him to get the Get Gone bug spray, and one morning she gets some coffee, she wakes up Shadow in their bed, and she leads him out to the kitchen, tells him to sleep, and tells him she needs to rob the casino. She wants to do it on her own. I love that this was Laura's doing, we find out. Like, this wasn't something that Shadow wanted to do. This was all Laura's doing. Why? To give herself purpose, to give herself a more meaningful life, because she doesn't really feel like she has anything, and basically, she's been eliminating options until she came to her final decision. He wonders if she's unhappy, and Shadow says that she makes him happy, but Laura tells him that she resents not being happy, even though she doesn't really resent him. She genuinely does care about Shadow, but unfortunately, she's just not happy despite whatever she does. She just can't possibly be happy and satisfied in this world, and I think that, again, is one of the most satisfying and interesting arcs we've had so far. So she explains that she simply wants more and says that Shadow is just too good for her. Like, he has everything and he has his shit together. He doesn't deserve her, he's just too good for her, and she doesn't really deserve him. That's just, he's kind of just better where he is. So, you can see that she really was not happy in life. This was not the perfect girl. And he's getting increasingly frustrated, obviously, because he doesn't see her the way. He sees her as perfect. He sees her as just this beautiful girl. And she tells him that she's worked at the casino for 8 years and can predict what everyone will do. She says she has a perfect plan and Shadow will never get caught. Obviously, we know, though, Shadow does get caught. And I love the way that was intercut with him immediately getting caught. So she visits him in prison. Shadow tells her that he has bad luck. She figures that something went wrong, but insists the plan was perfect and someone fucked them. She doesn't really know who it is. Now, I'm assuming this had to do with Wednesday. I mean, it just kind of makes sense. You know, Wednesday, as we know, is by definition a con man. I mean, sure, he is Odin, but in this world, he has been given the role as a con man. So I think it kind of only makes sense if Wednesday had to do with fucking them over, because that really was the catalyst for, Shadow going to jail and everything that went down with Laura. So I think Wednesday probably is the one behind this, but again, I could be wrong. But she obviously confessed her parts to reduce her sentence to 3 years each. Basically, she's going to make sure that she takes the blame for everything, and then they'd be back to their lives. So remember, it's only supposed to be about 3 years, and Shadow refuses to let her go to prison. I mean, she didn't really do anything wrong. Sure, she came up with the idea, but he is the one who did everything. And Laura says that she was the one who got Shadow into it. He points out that he said yes and got caught, and he'll be out in 3 years. He's willing to do all of this for her. Again, it really does show Shadow's not a dick. I mean, that's something that I do like, is that, yeah, sure, Shadow might be portrayed that way, but in reality, he's a nice guy, and he really is willing to help Laura, and he genuinely does love her, and he assures her that he can take it if she's on the other side. He asks her if she can wait for him, and Laura assures him that she can, that it shouldn't be a problem. So she goes home, she takes a collect call from Shadow. He continues calling her, and Robbie and Audrey come over to keep her company and change her light bulbs. So you can see that this is like a regular routine where they're always helping her out, just making sure she's okay. And she comes home and finds Donnie, obviously her cat, dead on the kitchen floor. So after cursing the cat, she pours herself a drink. She calls Robbie over, and he buries the cat and says that he and Audrey are glad to be there for her. And I gotta say, I'm not usually a fan of Dane Cook, but he was damn good in this scene. I really liked his character, honestly, and Robbie invites her to crash on their couch, but Laura refuses. She's just not going to do that. And she curses and says she didn't even really like Donnie. And Robbie motions her over so he can hug her. And he says that he knows the situation with Shadow sucks. And they kiss for a moment. And Laura pulls away and apologizes, says she's alone and drunk. And basically, just to feel something again, because Laura just wants to feel something real, she gets on the kitchen table. And they do have sex on the counter. So yeah, Laura did in fact cheat on Shadow. But it was a lot more for her own needs. Like, this wasn't to ruin their relationship. This wasn't to have an affair. It was simply to feel something. She just hasn't really felt anything ever in her life, and she wants to feel that with Robbie. So the next day, Robbie visits Laura at her home. She says that he told Audrey he had to help Laura move some furniture. Laura tells him to say what he means, and Robbie admits that he came there to fuck her some more. And Laura tells him the night before was just a one-time thing. That's all it was. She wanted to see how it would work out, and it's just a one-time thing. Obviously, he's growing attached, though, because, I mean, how can you not? One, Laura's beautiful. I mean, she definitely is a dime, and I'd be down to do, the same thing, but at the same time, he is definitely growing attached, obviously. He's known Laura for a while, and you get the sense that he's really liked her and everything, but she says that now she's waiting for Shadow. She's gonna make sure that he comes back because that's who she truly does love. And he says he understands. Laura grabs him, tells him to say it again. He does, and she invites him in. So, despite the fact that she wanted to stop, they continue to have this affair, and again, this could have easily been something really dumb, but because of how well it developed Laura's character, this affair really did make sense in context to everything else. So 5 days short of 3 years, Laura is preparing for Shadow's homecoming. This is essentially the beginning of the show. I mean, this is how the show started. And Shadow calls, says that something feels weird, but he doesn't know what. And he asks if everything's okay. And of course, we saw this scene before. This is how the show basically started, but we're seeing it from a different perspective. And after everything we got with Laura, this scene is slightly different. This is less of Laura excited for Shadow to come home. She's just as excited, but at the same time, you can tell that there's a lot of things that she's hiding. And she assures him that everything is fine, and Robbie is coming by to help her prepare Shadow's surprise party. So Shadow definitely had an inkling. He knew something was going on between Robbie and Laura. I mean, she wasn't calling him a lot. They didn't really have many interaction. I mean, he obviously was very worried. And Robbie is on the bed naked at this point. We didn't realize this, but he is, like, butt naked on the bed, and once she hangs up, she dresses, tells him to get dressed, and later they drive, and Robbie says that they break up with their spouses and go off. He's ready for them to run away because he really does love what he has with her, and Laura tells him that they're just not doing that, and insists that she does love Shadow. And of course, Robbie's very confused. Why the hell would you do this to me? Like, why would you continue routinely fuck me over and over again if you want nothing to do with me? When I really thought it was, I kind of saw it as this was less of Laura just wanting to have sex with Robbie and more of, again, wanting to feel something, just wanting to feel that intimacy, wanting to feel just something, anything. And she really hasn't. And she tells him to think about it as, Robbie tells her that she doesn't love him the way that Shadow loves her and says that he feels differently than what they agreed it was a limited thing. And Laura tells him to think about it as a sweet memory. It was fun and he didn't get caught. And Robbie wonders if that was all for her. And Laura tells him that it has to end that night. She tells him to drive, asks him to sing the song on the radio because it's her favorite, gives him a blowjob, and then what we expect to happen happens. Her arm hits the brake, the car crashes, and she's dead. And I loved the way that was done. I don't think they really could have done that scene any better, but this last half of the episode is by far the most interesting. We see the next morning she floats above the crash site and stares in shock at her body, and she finds herself in the middle of the desert with Anubis. Remember Anubis? We saw the character last week, and suddenly that beginning scene is a lot more vital to the plot. It makes a lot more sense why we saw that, and he leads her to his scales, tries to take her heart, but she pushes the heart side of the scale down and tells Anubis that her heart definitely isn't lighter than a feather, because she never really felt anything again. She never really felt anything, and she asks where she's going. Anubis tells her that she passes through, and there's a bottle of bug spray in a hot tub, and Anubis tells Laura that in life she believed in nothing, so she will go to nothing. Again, she didn't think that there was heaven, she didn't think there was hell, she's just gonna go to absolutely nothing. She's gonna go in her casket, and that's how it's gonna go. And she refuses to get in the coffin. She's just not gonna do that. There are too many loose ends she has to tie up, and she's demanding to go back. Anubis tells her flesh has already been cut by the coroners, and she's in the ground. And he asks who she is to misjudge him from his duty, and is surprised when Laura is pulled away into the sky. So again, this clearly is not her choice. I mean, she wants to go out on her own terms, and she literally digs herself out of her own grave, and she spits out embalming fluid. She realizes where she is. She sees this flickering gold light on the edge of the cemetery. She walks towards it as it starts to rain. Kind of remind me of Evil Dead. You guys remember the Evil Dead remake? This very much reminded me of that. It was basically just as disgusting. She discovers the light is coming from Shadow as he hangs from a tree by his neck, of course, from the first episode, and we realize that she was there, and Technical Boy's children are standing around. She runs over, tears two of the children apart with superhuman strength. Suddenly, she's no longer mortal. She clearly does have these powers, and she leaps onto the road, tears it apart, drops it to the ground. She tears apart the remaining children, and she hides before Shadow sees her. He stares at the bloody bodies, and then just walks away. Again, doesn't really think much of it. He doesn't even really know she's there, but realizing that she was there in the show a lot more than we thought, I think really does add a lot more to a lot of the scenes, and really does make a lot of sense in context to what actually happened. So the next day she's walking down the street, she holds her severed arm, which, I mean, that was quite a sight to behold. She goes in her home, takes a shower to wash the blood and dirt, and once she's done, she packs a bag, sees the golden light approaching the front door from the outside. Realizing it's Shadow, she hides in the hot tub, and once he leaves, she goes to Audrey's house, and she starts to stitch her arm back on with Audrey's craft supplies, and her stomach is rumbling. She looks at the scrapbook that Audrey prepared for Shadow, obviously because Audrey does want to help Shadow get closure, and we get this incredible scene where Audrey comes in, sees Laura, obviously freaked out. I mean, she thought this girl was dead. Clearly she's not. And she grabs a phone, runs to the bathroom, slams the door shut. And I love that she can see Laura. It's different than what I've seen before on shows. But yeah, Laura is very much alive. And basically, she asks her not to call the police, breaks open the door. She asks to use Audrey's toilet and does so anyway to expel the rest of the embalming fluid in her guts, and Laura explains and asks Audrey to turn around, and Audrey does so sobbing. She asks what's going on. Laura says she really doesn't know, because no, she doesn't. She doesn't know how this is all happening, and Laura explains that she needed Audrey's craft supplies, and Audrey asks her what's the last thing she remembered before her death. And embarrassed, Laura realizes that Audrey knows what happened and asks if Robbie's dead, and Audrey admits she hasn't seen Robbie since he died. So I'm willing to bet Robbie's not dead. I don't think he's dead either. I think we're going to see him again. And she also admits that she may have told everyone what Laura and Robbie were doing at the funeral service and that Shadow knows, and she tried to fuck him on Laura's grave, and basically as revenge. And Audrey admits that she's not proud of herself. And again, this scene was extremely well done because, yes, what Audrey did was very fucked up, but what Laura did was just as bad. And I really did love the way that we sympathize with Audrey here. I mean, this was her husband, obviously. She doesn't doesn't want, Laura fucking her husband, and she had Robbie buried with his dick that Laura bit off, shoved up his ass, and she figures that she should thank both of them because it's easier grieving someone when she's glad that they're dead. And she stitches Laura's arm on, explains she made the scrapbook because memories lie, and that's true. I mean, that's been a big part of this episode, is that memories do lie. What Shadow thought was going on is not really what was happening at all. And Laura says she feels terrible about the affair, but Audrey doesn't really care. She doesn't really care about Laura's opinion. She wants to move on from it. Audrey asks what she thinks about what she did, and Laura admits that she did a shitty thing, and it wasn't really about Audrey at all. She didn't want to get Audrey involved. And Laura says that she told one big lie with many smaller lies, and the big lie was that she told Shadow that she could wait for him, and obviously, she didn't. She didn't wait for him at all. She completely went against that, and she asks Audrey to borrow her car. So she drives Laura across the country, and Laura is reading her obituary, and she complains about the lack of effort that went into it, and she tells her that she was shitty and wonders how she'll live with Shadow, and Laura sees the light coming from Shadow in the distance, and Audrey tells her that Shadow deserves better than her, and again, it all kind of goes back to what Laura said, that she simply does not deserve Shadow. He's too good for her, and she laughs when Laura says that Shadow is and was the light of her life, and says she considered Shadow a puppy, and Laura says that she does love Shadow now. Even if she didn't then, she does now, and I thought that was definitely a very powerful scene. You really do believe that she really does love Shadow, because she hasn't really felt anything till death, really. She hasn't really felt anything since then, and now she really does love Shadow, and obviously wants to make amends with everything that she did. So Ibis and a Jackal then walk to the road, and I thought it was cool that we got to see Ibis doing something that wasn't telling a story. I thought it was kind of cool the way we saw that, especially because Ibis hasn't really served much of a purpose other than that so far, right? But Audrey then breaks just in time. The Jackal actually transforms into Anubis, we find out, and he tells Laura that he remembers her, and he's not done with her. Remember, she was going to betray him, and he obviously is not okay with that, and they take her to the funeral home that they own, and Ibis explains that they provide continuity, and Ibis then motions her onto the table, and Anubis removes her blouse, lies her down. They fully attach her arm and paint her skin, explaining that they have to tend to her flesh because it just can't tend to itself anymore. And Anubis tells her that her heavy heart sank her and asks if it was love, and Laura tells him that it wasn't, but she knows it is now. And Anubis says that it has her at a disadvantage. Ibis assures her that Shadow will take whatever god that sends her back to him, and Anubis tells her that when she's done, he will complete his task and deliver her onto darkness. So obviously, again, Anubis isn't done with her, but then we get to the ending of the episode where we basically see the same thing we saw last week, just a little bit different, where Laura goes to Shadow's hotel room. She puts up fly paper to kill the flies attracted to her corpse, again, just like the Get Gone spray. So she puts on her wedding dress and waits, and, she feels like she's completely reborn. I mean, her skin's been repainted, her arms reattached. This is kind of like a new beginning for her, and she finally arrives, and it's finally the perfect time where Laura feels like she can finally make her presence known as she greets him, finally feeling that love that she's wanted to feel all her life, and that is the way this episode ends. Really great stuff overall, but let's just get this episode and where this is going to take us into the last 4 episodes of the season. So, holy shit, guys. I mean, like I said, I knew we were going to get a lot of explanation as to what was really going on with Laura. I didn't expect it quite in this way. I expected it to be mostly Laura telling Shadow what's going on. But, I mean, how do you really do that? Like, after all of this, how do you really rationally explain to someone what's going on? It's kind of crazy. I mean, Shadow already knows a lot of it about the affair and things like that. So, where this is really going to take us, I'm not entirely sure. But I do like that Laura is still a part of the story, and I like that she essentially kind of got a second chance. Like, she's not really done, and she wants to try to make up for what she did to Shadow, because, I mean, in context, you can understand why she did what she did to Robbie, because really, she just wanted to feel something, and it's not that she didn't with Shadow, it's because her life was already shitty enough that she just couldn't feel that way towards Shadow. I mean, now, yes, she definitely loves him, but she never really realized what she had till it was truly gone. And now that it's gone, she is ready to restart again. The question is her relationship going to be as fresh as she really thinks it is? That's something I'm definitely interested in getting into. Does Laura really belong with Shadow, or does she have an entirely different purpose that we just don't know about? And I'm interested in seeing really what's going to happen there. I think that definitely is very interesting moving forward. Now, as far as Anubis, I like getting that explanation of why we saw Anubis last week, how, he's not done with Laura, and I think that is going to come back to haunt her again. She chose to decide to, come back to life and to walk among the dead. She wants to live. And as far as Robbie goes, I don't think Robbie's dead either. I think he's going to come back. I think there's going to be something involving that, whether she's going to find a way to bring him back or he's actually not dead. We don't really know, but all we know is that Audrey says she hasn't seen Robbie. She did not say that Robbie is dead. Robbie's corpse is definitely out there, but now that Audrey, Laura is well and alive, alive and well, Audrey isn't really sure if Robbie's actually dead. And I gotta say, Audrey is a character that they're really handling very well. They could have easily made her the, bitchy, regretful, just crazy woman, but there's so much more to her than that. Obviously, yes, there's a lot of crazy stuff going on with her, but she's the least crazy thing, really. I mean, she's just kind of in the midst of it all, and she's trying to deal with it, and she's kind of just accepting it, okay, Laura's alive, not really much you can do about that, but she is in fact alive, and it's a lot to comprehend, honestly, so you can understand why Audrey is feeling this way. I thought that was a very powerful scene overall, and I really did love their bonding here. Just a lot of fun to watch, and, definitely, again, I mean, there was a lot of catharsis with Audrey. This is a big cathartic moment for her, confronting the woman that she really doesn't want to see right now, but now moving past it, because what's there to do? I mean, she had the affair, but Laura's dead now, so what's the point of her to really, get too upset about? So we'll have to see really where that's gonna go. But I really did love the way they told the story, I have to say. I can understand if someone thinks we didn't really need this episode, but I think we did, because now it's really going to make us see what every action has led up to this and why Laura is the way she is. Laura had sex with Robbie not because she wanted to cheat on Shadow, but because she wanted to feel that love and that closeness that she just didn't really feel with him. She knew she was supposed to, but she just didn't. Again, he was just simply too good for her. He was too good for her in the sense that he had his life together. He was on a good track, and she kind of destroyed it. And I think she's really willing to pick up the pieces, and she is willing to take responsibility, because in many ways she did kind of destroy his life, and I'm interested in seeing really what's going on there. Like I said, the whole thing with him not pulling off this operation right and not successfully robbing, the casino, I think is solely Wednesday. I think that's all kind of Wednesday would end up happening there. So I definitely think that something is definitely going on with that. I don't know why Wednesday chose Shadow, if it has to do with Laura. But again, we know that there probably is something greater going on with Shadow than even Laura knows about. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing their bonding here. There's a lot going on between those two, and I think definitely whatever happens in that conversation, that's really going to lead us into the next half of the season. Overall, guys, I really did love this episode. We are now at the halfway point. I think this was definitely the right time to give us this episode. It gave us explanations why Laura is the way she is. It made us realize what was really going on with her, and it really did give us a very solid story. This really does work as its own episode, and I heard a lot of people say this works as a second pilot, and it makes sense. It is the end of the first half of the season. We're now approaching into the actual main narrative. That's kind of how I saw it, that these first 4 episodes were in fact setup episodes, and now we're approaching into the main narrative of the show. But overall, guys, I really did love this episode. This was by far, in my opinion, the best episode of the season, and I'm absolutely going to give American Gods Season 1, Episode 4, Get Gone, a 4.75 out of 5, or an A. So, guys, my review of American Gods, and those guys thought this episode overall. Left your thoughts in it. I really did love this episode overall. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Did you think it was important? Did you like seeing Laura's perspective? Emily Browning, like I said, I mean, she really did blow me away here. I've never really thought much of her, but she was incredible in this episode. But that's my review. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you guys in my next video, which I think will be for leftovers, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.